Welcome to a brand new episode of On VJ's playlist. And guess who has joined us here? It can't get more humbling and more privileged than this to have the man who's been representing Indian metal for the last 2 decades. Sahil Makhija, aka Demonstealer, also the frontman of Demonic Resurrection, one of the premier bands, metal bands that we have in the country today. Sahil, welcome to On VJ's playlist. I guess the only thing I would envy about this gentleman here is are the long, lovely tresses that he has. So before we get diving into finding out the beauty secret behind that, firstly, Sahil, welcome once again. It's possibly the third time I've said welcome already in the introduction itself, but I'm so happy that we have you today with us, joining us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. And yeah, things are good. I'm good. How are you?
Very well. For our viewers who are watching this and like me, are little to absolutely not aware about the Indian metal scene, Sahil Makhija has been one of the most prominent faces of the genre in our country for the last 2 decades. Of course, he has formed the symphonic and the most dynamic black metal death and black metal outfit of our country, called Demonic Resurrection, and he has possibly represented the band in most of the globally acclaimed metal fests, around the world. They've also won the Global Metal Award in 2010 with I think it was the Golden Gods. Is that what it's called?
The Golden God Awards, hosted by Metal Hammer in the UK.
Yeah, yes. Besides this, he also has his own record label, the Demonstealer Records, and he also curates. And very, very, this is possibly the most standout thing about him is that he runs his own YouTube channel called the Headbangers Kitchen. As unique as he is, as unique as his YouTube channel is, what's unique about the YouTube channel is that he curates a lot of these amazing keto recipes. And while he prepares them with absolute meticulousness and absolute precision, fans across the world are treated to amazing metal riffs in the background. Of course, Sahil, through the course of the interview, we will be exploring these different facets about you. But I want to first begin by asking you is, do you remember the first song, the first metal song that you heard, and it sort of convinced you that you have a liking towards this, you are inclined towards doing something around this?
Actually, the first metal song that I ever heard was, I think, in the sixth standard. I was on a class trip, and one of my friends had got Iron Maiden's self-titled album on tape. And I remember sitting and putting on the headphones and listening to the first song, Running Free. And it just blew my mind. I was totally taken in by the music. And on that trip, I couldn't stop listening to that tape. But after that, actually, I didn't further explore the metal genre. I actually got heavily into techno and pop music because it was what all the girls were listening to. And, you wanted to be cool, and you wanted all the girls to think you're like, oh, he knows so much about music and he likes all the same stuff. So that's kind of what I was into for the next few years. But it was in the ninth standard that my friends kind of said, listen, what is this crap you're listening to? Here's some Metallica and here's some more Iron Maiden, and why don't you listen to this? And that's when I really got into metal music. I took those tapes home, and the riffs, the double bass drumming, just the heaviness and the feeling I got listening to that music just sucked me into the genre. And, here I am 24, 25 years later, still listening to the music and even playing it.
Right. But Sahil, from what I understand is, I think you started at the very beginning of, the new decade in 2000. And that's when Demonic Resurrection first came together. And, first of all, what was the environment back then? Because metal in India today is, I don't know. I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but it's still somewhere a very, very scarce and mythical concept in the country. So around that time, when access to internet was also very it was a matter of privilege. When a lot of people, when there was so much of popular music, dominating the charts at that time also. So how or rather, what convinced you that metal was something, that this was a space you wanted to break into, and this was a space that you wanted to pioneer in the country?
So I think there are two questions in that
Yeah,
whole
I've
statement.
merged. Yeah,
That's all right. So I think in terms of wanting to pursue metal and be a
yeah,
pioneer, like those things are not on your mind.
right.
I mean, like at that point, I'm like, I love this music. I want to learn guitar. I want to get on stage. I want to play my songs. I want to rock out. I want to tour the world. Like that's what you're thinking. You're not thinking about what is the scene like here. Is there potential to make money, a career? None of that stuff.
Mm,
It's pure passion that drives you. And I was 16 years old when, I got into like heavy metal. 15, 16 years old. I looked for musicians for 2 years in my college without much success, and finally formed Demonic Resurrection in the year 2000. And there was it was literally like, we are here to play this music. We don't care about anything else. We're not looking for chances. Like, I mean, we wanted to do something with the music, but there was not like, okay, let's see what is cool now and what has got more opportunities in it. No, it's like, we want to do a show. There's nobody organizing shows. We'll do it ourselves.
right.
Studios, hey, we can't afford one. Let's just record ourselves at home. Oh man, no distribution. Okay, let's just burn our own CDs. Color Xerox or black and white Xerox our covers. Stick it to, like, it was DIY. We were like, we don't care about anything else. We want to play this music because we love this music.
Yeah,
So that was our scene. And about the scene in that time in general, I think rock music has always been niche in India, right
yeah,
from this, I guess, from the 60s and 50s, or whenever it started, showing up in India. It's always been a niche genre. And over the years, it has evolved and grown. And I would say metal is like the bastard child of the rock scene in India. So it's really like that. And you can see that the rock scene eventually branched out into a lot of different, I would say, subgenres, or it evolved into what you have as folk rock today, and or like the Raghu Dikshits, the Avial, the
yeah,
Thaikudam Bridge, the local train, the Hindi rock scene. Like, it evolved into all these more commercially viable, sort of evolved forms of that
yeah.
basic rock music. Whereas metal, even though it's evolved, it is always going to be a niche genre, and it continues to remain one, but it's very much alive and well. And as long as the music is still flowing, there's always going to be some kid who's inspired to put up a rock gig, or there'll be somebody out there, forming a metal band and playing that music. And despite the ups and downs over the years, metal is still pretty much alive and well.
In one of your interviews, I've actually, I came across a quote where you said that, over the past few years, there has been emergence of bands from, the smaller cities, with like the Jaipur and, some of them from Kochi. If you look at some really successful names in the Indian metal scene today, like the Downtrodens or the members of Chaos, who are from Kerala. So, I mean, uh, do you want? I mean, this is something I often hear people in the independent music space say, that yes, we are there, but it's gonna take a long while, for it to actually see, for it to actually become a phenomenon in the country. And do you think that's partially also because sustenance is a huge challenge when you're trying to make a career in the metal music scene?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I should break the bad news, in the beginning, that there is no chance of a career in metal. There's never. I mean, it may be a little pessimistic to say
Yeah,
never going to be a chance, but in the grand scheme of things, in the relatively near future, say 10, 20 years, the the chance of making a career playing metal music is not going to happen.
Right.
And it is largely because of, one, the fact that metal is a niche genre,
Yeah.
globally as well. It's not just in India, but in India it becomes even more niche because, unlike say something like hip hop,
Yeah.
metal still remains the music that is consumed by economically, like people who are well to do economically.
Yeah.
Like rap was something that it didn't matter if you lived in the slums or you lived in a penthouse.
Yeah.
That music, because of the ease of listening, the language, the beats, it transcended all stratas of society, so to speak. So that gives you a different opportunity to sort of exploit that music and make it financially viable. That's why you will have rap stars in India before you have rock stars.
Yeah.
Even as I mentioned earlier, rock as rock and roll, like the 80s rock, what Parikrama and Vayu and all used to play and cover, that form of rock is never going to get popular in India.
Yeah.
It's never going to be making anybody any kind of money unless you are a band that's playing, say, weddings and corporate events, and you're sort of doing a very different kind of career path. But if you look at the rock bands, so to speak, the ones that are actually doing something, they are all artists that have evolved from rock, but they are now incorporating either folk elements, like Raghu Dikshit, what he did with, folk rock music, or somebody like, I would say, the Local Train, they have Hindi rock. So you take those elements of rock which you like, and you kind of form something new with it. And unlike like, also I think Bollywood plays a huge part in the success of music.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like, Bollywood really glamorized rap music, and it really kind of took the concept and the idea to the masses.
Yeah.
And while rock on kind of tried to do that,
Yeah.
again, the simple fact of owning a guitar, a drum set, a rehearsal space, just that the financial uh, requirement to just enjoy that music or to be able to create that music, automatically, again, like I said, it cuts off a large part of society in this
Yeah.
country. Whereas
Absolutely.
rap, it's like you have a voice, that is enough. Two
Yeah.
guys, one guy doing a beat, one guy rapping over it, you don't need anything. So I think because of all these things, it kind of shapes the way metal is. So I think the metal bands that are successful today, honestly,
Yeah.
more than the music, it is always going to be the ones that are able to find a balance between regular life and band life, and they're able to sort of keep the band going, because at this point it's more about who can survive rather than it being a crowded space where you have to compete for attention. If you've survived 20-25 years, you've already got a head start on everybody else.
Right. While you spoke about, it could be the harsh, it could be pessimistic, but it's unfortunately the harsh truth. And I'm sure, Sahil, you're saying it from a place where you have actually lived this harsh truth, because that is what propelled you to start Headbangers Kitchen, where you had where in another interview you had said that you had sort of become disillusioned with the music scene and with the inability of metal breaking into the of Indian metal breaking into the global market. So I believe Headbangers Kitchen was initiated from a place where you collaborated with this filmmaker Srinivas Sundarajan, who also directed one of the music videos for the band. And while directing this music video, I guess there was a food recipe also that was also being cooked about, and that's what led to the birth of Headbangers Kitchen. Would you want to elaborate further on this?
Yeah, definitely. So actually, here's the thing. Headbangers Kitchen was never intended to, again, be financially viable, be a monetized thing. Like, there was no expectation. I was just making food and posting about it on Facebook. I've always loved cooking. So that's something that, and cooking is, something like you don't leave because you're always eating, like you have to eat. So it kind of stays with you. And yeah, so the real reason I wanted to just do it was simply because I had these recipes and I was like, yeah, YouTube was just becoming a big thing in India and I was watching all these video recipes. So I was like, why not film mine as well? Again, there was no intent to make money. Because I think I realized 20 years ago that I'm never going to make money in my life, and like as long as I make enough to sort of pay my basic bills and stuff, I'm okay. So the intent of Headbangers Kitchen was just doing something fun with food, and then Vas was like, cooking recipe is so boring. Why don't we do something more? And for me, everything I did in life was to sort of build Demonic Resurrection up a little bit, whether it was
Right.
calling my record label Demonstealer Records, whether it was having my studio called Demonic Studios, whether it was calling my cooking blog on Facebook Demonic Cookery. The idea was branding always.
Right.
So I thought of the idea of having a cooking show where I had a band that I would interview and they would taste a dish that I made based on their song name or their band name or something. And in the process, people would hopefully watch it because it's an exciting, interesting thing. And they would see, oh, this guy, the host has a band, let's check out his band. So
Right.
for me, it was a win-win situation. I actually did this for, I think, 4 years before I got disillusioned with this. Because after
Okay.
4 years of doing it, so I'll be very frank, like most people probably they're very scared to say this, but for me, there are two reasons to do some things. One is I love doing it and, there is an audience for it and there is some kind of growth, or I'm being paid to do it and then I'm happy to do it as a, more like, okay, cool, I'm being paid. So it's covering some aspect.
Yeah.
With Headbangers Kitchen, it was 4 years and there was hardly any growth. And this is just because it's part of the Indian metal scene and the Indian metal scene doesn't grow, not at the rate as it should or that it makes it worthwhile. So I was like, I'm done with this. I can't like put this pressure on myself to put out one video a month or whatever, and then, coordinate with artists, prep an interview, edit the videos myself or get people to do it, invest money in it when I was making no money from the channel. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm just going to forget all this. I will shoot videos by myself with my own camera when I have time and when I feel like it.
Okay.
So I took the pressure off myself. And then whenever I was in the mood or when I cooked something that I thought, oh man, I want to film this and show people, I filmed it.
Right.
During this process, somewhere along the way, I started the keto diet. And I was like, oh wow, I'm making a pizza out of cauliflower. I have to film this. And I started filming these videos. And because I was doing the diet, I was making these videos. And it was just me being in the right place at the right time. The American market was exploding for keto. And there were no channels, not just in America, but like anywhere in the world, there were like a handful of channels doing anything keto related.
Yeah.
And because I was in the right place at the right time, my video quality was fairly decent. It wasn't like good or anything, but it was better than most of the other videos that were there, which looked like horror movies, people shooting in their kitchen with no light and just everything looks dark and like unappetizing.
Yeah.
My videos had some decent lighting. The food looked good. For whatever reason, they enjoyed the way I tasted the food or whatever. So my channel took off. And then finally, I started making some money from YouTube and I started getting views. Like I think in a few months, I went from 5,000 subscribers, which took me 5 years to achieve. I went to 10,000 in a period of 2 months.
Wow.
And I think in 5 years on YouTube, I made $97 when I got paid out. I was with some company that helped me out, but anyway, I canceled my contract. They paid me $93 from the 120 that the channel had earned in 5 years. The next month alone, I made $120.
Right.
So, I was making money, I was getting views, I was getting comments, I was getting subscribers. And I was motivated and I went ahead, and then that became my career after about a year.
I mean, because you said that, keto as a concept had really boomed in the US, I think the Sahil, for our viewers who do not know, a large part of your subscriber base are actually from US, isn't it?
Yeah, it was about 40-45% earlier, but now it's come down to about 30%, with the remaining 70 spread across all the other countries in the world.
And how much of it are from India?
I think about 19 to 20% is from India. So the second biggest demographic is India.
And do you think that's also largely because in India, unfortunately, I was reading another interview where you said that it kind of infuriated you, where a lot of the Indian subscribers actually write to you asking for pure vegetarian recipes. And one of the most, one a particular fact that I think most of them are unaware of and absolutely ignorant to is they don't understand that egg is actually considered vegetarian, everywhere else in the world, but in India it is looked as non-veg, and they don't
Yeah.
consider milk as a non-vegetarian thing. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
So how did you? I mean, for everyone who's trying to crack the YouTube code here, what, in your opinion, what made you stand out over there, in your opinion, as a YouTuber?
So, like I said, right. I think in my case, like I said, it was nothing but right time and the right place, because there was a gap. Like, people were looking for keto recipes. There
Right.
were no keto channels. I had what they were looking for. And that's largely what YouTube is about today also. It's like, what are you fulfilling for the viewer, Like, if you're a celebrity and you're posting on YouTube, it's very different. You've created a fan following. But if you are a channel and if you're creating content, what necessity of the viewer are you fulfilling? What are they looking for? That is what you have to, at least as in the space that I am in, what are you doing that people are looking for? And in my case, when people type keto recipes, mine would show up because I was the one of the 5 channels probably doing keto videos.
Right.
And it's just luck. It kind of snowballs from there. Like, a lot of bands have done this. Since we also talk about music, there are a lot of bands that sort of, they they are part of a new genre of music. They are the pioneers. If you look at, say, maybe thrash metal in the 80s, bands like Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, etc., they all were part of uh, a movement that was the creation and the birth of thrash metal. If you go to the 90s, there was new metal. Bands
Right.
like System of a Down, Korn, Slipknot, Limp Bizkit, fusing these more groovy rap and like these more popular sort of themes and vibes to their music. So that happens quite often in all sort of creative fields, and there are bands that are, and again, like, there are people who are like, oh, we see this is cool, so we are going to make this music. And there are those that kind of, they are the pioneers of that movement, and they are the ones that sort of really make it, so to speak. I think a very good example of this is this Indian band called Sky Harbor.
Huh.
I don't know
I've
if you
heard of
know
them.
Sky Harbor.
I've
So
heard of them.
Keshav
Yeah.
Dhar, yeah,
Yes.
young kid in his dorm room in Manipal, making music because he's loving this modern metal sound that is, he's heard from, like, Periphery and Bulb and all, and he's really good at it. And at that point, he's played the right music at the right time, and because he was good at it, people found him and they fell in love with his music. So similarly, like, keto is becoming popular. I'm just making recipes. I'm doing a decent enough job of it. People are like, hey, we want this. It's there. This guy is doing it. So, let's follow or subscribe or whatever. And I think that's really a big part of success for a lot of people. Right time and right place.
And rightfully so also, Sahil, because people think that it's just frivolous at how, I mean, there are cynics, of course, who would argue about how frivolous it is that a man who wanted to make music is now, cooking, because unfortunately a lot, that particular concept is also lost out on a lot of people. But it's not like you never merged your passion with, what you're doing for a living. Because of course, while interviewing, you've interviewed several bands. You had guest episodes, whether it was Nerve Cell from Dubai or Gojira. Of course, there's also Undying Incomplete, Plague Throat, Bhayanak Moths from our Indian metal community. You've customized dishes on the channel, based on their band names, whether it was the Undying Pizza, a pizza recipe, I think that you made, or the Bhayanak
Yeah.
Bacon Bomb. So, do you want to tell us more about that? How, about filming those guest episodes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, but to first, like, to answer your initial part of the question, is like, I mean, people always talk like that. I got more, I got more shit for being in a comedy rock band than I did for having a cooking show. You know, like a lot of metalheads take themselves very
And for,
seriously.
I'm sorry to cut you there, but for a lot of people who aren't aware, you did have a brief comedy, rock work, a workshop stint. Sorry, it was called the workshop. Is that
Yeah, it's
right?
called Workshop. Yeah, Workshop was the name of the band, and we wore blue overalls and yellow hard hats like construction workers. And yeah, we played funny songs, and we jumped around on stage and made jokes. And a lot of metalheads, yeah, they got really upset because it's like, oh man, how can you like do silly stuff like this? You're selling out or whatever. Honestly, for me, since I can remember, there have always been people criticizing or hating what I do. That's just life. So for me, I just ignore most of it, and I think the same with whatever criticism came my way about cooking and doing that. Uh, for me, I focused on the kid who messaged me saying, "Hey man, my mother hated metal music and she never liked me listening to it, but I showed her your cooking show, and now she's happy to let me listen to my music, and she also made me this dish from your channel." So for me, that's the win really. I don't care about people who
Absolutely.
complain. There's no point in doing that. As for the dishes and stuff, yeah, I mean, it's I used to just sit down with the band's music and just listen to their songs and be like, what can I do, and of course I would message and ask, like, what do you like to eat, what are your dietary restrictions, if any, do you like a particular meat over another or something like that, and I get my ideas from that pretty much.
Sahil, coming to some of your recent releases in recent memory, let's speak about the collaborative project called the Holocene Termination. I hope I'm getting that right. Where you
Yes.
have collaborated with a bunch of some of the best metal talents out there, and you've also collaborated with the likes of Gino Banks and Mohini Dey. Do you want to tell your fans and the viewers out there about how did you decide to put this project together? Because I believe it stemmed from a belief where you said that the only way you wanted to keep the fire burning in you as far as your passion for metal goes is through way of collaborations. And I think given the pandemic, collaborations have now become the new norm. Do you want to tell us more on that?
Yeah, sure. So actually for me it goes way back, way before the pandemic. I think it was probably 2000 and I think 14 or 13 or something. I was working on my second solo album, and I had this idea that I would get different drummers to
Yeah.
play on different songs of the album. So I've always been like a massive drum fan. Like, even though I'm a guitar player and a vocalist in Demonic Resurrection, and that has been my primary sort of role and instrument and way of writing songs and everything, I just love drums. I love playing the drums, and I especially love extreme metal drumming, death metal drumming, and I'm a huge drum fan basically. So when I go to a gig, I'm always watching the drummer rather than anybody else. So my idea was to get maybe four of my favorite drummers to each play two songs on my album.
Okay.
And at that point, I wrote to this drummer, George Colliers from the band Nile, who had recently come to India and done a drum clinic. He was also on Headbangers Kitchen, and he is one of my favorite drummers.
Right.
So I asked him, I said, look, would you play a couple of songs on my album? And he said, yes, but I don't want to play a couple of songs. I want to play on the whole album. So I was like,
That's so
I
sweet.
mean, I was like, how can I say no? So I was like, okay, done. So that album came out in 2016. That's called This Burden Is Mine.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I was working on some Demonic Resurrection stuff, and I started working on another solo album as well.
Yeah.
And that's when I finally was able to collaborate and get multiple drummers. And this was in 2018. I put out my third solo album called The Last Reptilian Warrior.
Yeah.
This had four drummers, two bass players, four lead guitarists, and basically it's exactly what I'd envisioned doing, 5 years ago almost. is getting multiple musicians to feature on songs, and just to give every song a different flavor, and also sort of just fulfill my wish of having all these musicians play on my music. So I did that, and it's after that is when I got disillusioned with making music. The struggles of touring with Demonic Resurrection, struggling to get people to listen to the music, getting fans to buy the music and merch or whatever. And I think it was 2018, I announced Demonic Resurrection is doing like a farewell tour or whatever. We did 2 shows in India. We did a UK tour as well. And that was that. We did do another set of shows in 2019, because when the opportunity came up, I just couldn't say no. But largely, I was kind of disillusioned. I was like, I'm done with this. And then when the pandemic hit, that's when I was like, you know what? I need to stop whining and complaining about it, because I'm actually privileged enough to have a roof over my head. I have food on the table. My family is alive and well. And I have a studio where I can actually go and make music. And this was the time when, we had just come off the protest from the CAA, NRC thing, the riots in Delhi. And then you had all these, laborers walking to their villages, dying on the streets. So, I mean, just seeing how hard life is for people who are not privileged in this country just gave me a whole new lease of life, made me realize how privileged I was. And so I said, forget it. I'm just going to do what I do because I have the opportunity to make music. So let me go and record stuff in my studio. And that's kind of when I started recording my 2020 EP. So I actually started this EP, the Holocene Termination, but because when you collaborate with so many different musicians, and it takes time. So while I was waiting for people to finish recording and send me their parts, I actually wrote an EP where I played everything. I did drums, bass, guitar, vocals, and I put it out in 2020. And then by 2021, I put out a single with Mohini Day and Gino Banks. And then later on in the year, this EP came out. And so that's kind of how I got back into making music and just, doing what I do.
Sahil, of course, soon to succeed the Holocene Termination, we also have NonServium, which we have just put out in June 2022. This single, of course, is another massive collaboration with, David Dipole, Pratika, and Mystique. So how did this come about in place?
Okay, so what you're talking about is actually a series of 4 songs that came out one after the other. So in March, we put out the first song. Then in April, May, and NonServium was the 4th track in the series that came out in June. So this was, again, like I said, I had a different take on making music, and I wanted to get back to writing music for DR as well. And I knew that an album would take a lot of time for me to work on, because it does take a lot of bandwidth to sit down and do a full-length album. Plus, I was already in the process of doing my, I think, I want to say 4th solo album. So after those 2 EPs, I immediately started work on a new solo album, which I hope to put out either the end of this year or next year. So among all this stuff, I was like, I want to do something for DR, but I don't want to do a full album because that will take a year or 2 years, even for all I know. So I decided to do 4 songs because we had our 20th anniversary in 2020. And for the anniversary, we had 4 amazing artists who we've been working with over the years design t-shirts for us. So we had them do 4 unique artworks with 4 unique t-shirts. And I was like, you know what, we've got all these 4 artworks. Why don't I write a song based on each artwork? And that's exactly what I did. So for those who have not been following, but Demonic Resurrection has had lineup changes constantly in our 22 years. And more recently, it's basically just been me and drummer Viru left in the band. Viru also plays drums full time, and he plays for artists like Darshan Doshi, Salim Suleiman. Sorry, not Darshan Doshi. He plays for Darshan Rawal. He plays for Darshan Rawal. And he subs for Darshan Doshi and Salim Suleiman when he's not free. So he's pretty busy with all that stuff. So I had a chat with him. I said, look, we'll get some other drummers to like guest play on these songs. And we got Kevin Paradis from France, and we got David Dipole, who lives in Austria. We got an amazing keyboard player called Mystique, who lives in Australia and does some amazing, like remix kind of deathcore songs where she takes symphonic elements and puts them to like standard deathcore tracks. And yeah, I just started writing songs with these musicians, and then I was kind of figuring out what to do about lead guitars, and I just got happened to see Aditya post some videos on YouTube, on Facebook actually, and I just messaged him and said, "You want to join the band and play on these songs?" And he said, "Yeah." And we have Pratika, who has done some guest vocals. She has been in the metal scene for many years now. She had a
Yeah.
band called Chronic Phobia. She now does a lot more rap stuff, but she has also sung on one of our songs earlier. So I just called her and said I had some idea for like female vocals in the tracks. Can you come and do them? And she did. So it was really fun to sort of put these 4 songs together, and yeah, it was a blast.
Coming to a group note, Sahil, because we spoke about sustenance, we spoke about how um, there is so much. I mean, when people, like you said, when you spoke about your fan who messaged you saying that his parents were averse to him taking to metal because they thought that metalheads are all very beastly creatures, or I don't know, I mean, they might be a bad influence or something. But the fact that it's pretty much obvious, and when you meet metalheads from the world, you come across a more sensitive side to them, and that's something that not many people are aware of. But when we look at how in the midst of the pandemic, only the Indian metal scene has lost some really prominent names. um, and I'm speaking about Nitin Rajan and Rajashri, but Bhattacharya from Primitive, and Akshay Deodhar also. Very untimely losses, each one of them. As you know, a community member, as someone who is actually seen and witnessed their rise and their journeys side by side, if I could ask you the fondest memories that you've had with each of these gentlemen, how what would you like to recall?
I mean, for me, more than just musicians or people from the scene, they were actually friends.
Yeah.
We've hung out so many times and shared meals and had a good laugh and traveled together for shows. And it's just like there are so many memories, whether it's like what I remember in 1998 or 99, that's the first time I actually saw Nitin on
Yeah.
stage.
And I think
That
was
is,
he not? I think if I remember the quote that you gave, following his demise, you spoke about how you had actually heard him perform to a Sepultura cover, and
yeah,
yeah,
that's always the picture I had in my head of Nitin whenever anyone talks about him, is that guy on stage at Mood Indigo belting out that Sepultura cover. I mean, I had heard, obviously my favorite bands, but I think he was the first real like death metal growler in the local scene that I had seen. And he was a presence even back then, And we collaborated on music after that. He sung a song for my project Reptilian Death. In fact, he was the vocalist for a while, and we played at I had Mood Indigo together. And we've traveled for like Death Fest when he restarted his festival years later. They did a Hyderabad leg which we had traveled to together, and we've just had fun hanging out, me and Nitin and Raj and Akshay, because we were in Hellwind together. Raj was with me in the workshop. So these are close friends of mine. So I mean, there are just so many amazing memories with all of them.
right. Lastly, Sahil, before we end this interview, of course, this pandemic has been testing for musicians across the board, across genres, across languages. But when we specifically speak about Indian metal now, with the resumption of live gigs and a lot of the sustenance, a lot of um, career prospects and otherwise are actually dependent on live shows. Um, how do you gauge the possibilities shaping out for the Indian metal scene in the future?
So that's the thing about the metal scene. They've always had the good fortune, I guess, in some way, that they've never had to depend on the music for a living.
Yeah,
So everybody who's playing metal is not affected by the pandemic not having shows. It's more of a, I miss going to gigs and I miss playing on stage, but I'm
yeah,
still feeding my family. I'm still, living a decent life because I don't depend on the music. Whereas, I think the pandemic hit the working musicians much harder. The guys who play in wedding bands, the guys who depended on corporate gigs, the guys who depended on, playing in restaurants, or, just cruise ships, or, people who actually live like paycheck to paycheck, playing music on a daily basis, and that is their actual bread and butter. I think most of the sort of musicians who even played in, say, Bollywood bands and all, they have a sense of security because there's always family and stuff you can rely on. I mean, luckily Indians are very good at saving money, so I think most people, like, worst case, they had to pack up, like, from whichever city and go back to their hometown. But I don't think there was any uh, issue of them having to starve to death or have to walk home or whatever. They kind of, but it's the working musicians that really survive. For metal, it's just, like, okay, we can't play our show, we can't mosh, but now they're back with a vengeance, and shows are going to pick up at some point, and it'll continue as it has. I think more than anything, it's just for bands that are actually touring and stuff, there are things that have gotten a little more expensive, so chances of breaking even are a little harder. But again, like I said, they don't depend on the music for a living, so music has just become a slightly more expensive hobby than it was 2 years ago.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sahil. I think while doing this interview with you, a part of me is slightly more convinced and slightly more encouraged now to actually explore the many facets of the Indian metal scene. For our friends who are watching this and who have stayed with us till so far, apologies in advance if you feel that this wasn't particularly a very comprehensive interview, and that's largely because I myself am not very well acquainted with the scene. But just this chat with Sahil was so fulfilling, and it felt like I've learned something so much today. Thank you so much, Sahil, for doing this episode with me. And I wish you the very best, and hopefully, let's meet soon.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. And don't worry, you did a great job on the interview.
Thank you.
I think it was awesome, and it was a pleasure chatting with you as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sahil.